How to get real magical superpowers part 2. I can show you how to get real magical superpowers, but you'll need to be open-minded. So, are you ready? Hello and welcome back to Real World Magic, where we make your life more magical. My name's Neil Trigger, I'm going to be your magical host. And today I'm going to be expanding on a previous video of mine about how to gain real magical powers. Obviously there's been a lot of disagreement about that previous video, linked up here, and it talks about how you can use rapport to become psychic, get people to fall in love with you using spells, and even fly. But what about some other magical powers? Now the last video wasn't quite as long as this one's planned to be. Don't know how long that's going to work. It might work a little bit longer, I don't know. So, we didn't really have very much time to talk about some of the other magical powers that could be made in real life. So here's some more magical powers that you can get using real, true, verifiable and reliable methods in this video. How to get real magical superpowers part 2. Now firstly I want to point out that I've had a very mixed response about the last video that I did about how to gain magical powers, especially from those in witchcraft groups that I posted in. They said that my last video was wrong because there are many more things that can be done using magic than using the scientifically verifiable stuff that I'll show in this video. For example, flying is possible. It's called witch flying and it uses an ointment to induce an altered state of consciousness. So I wanted to talk about that first. So, witch flying. Some complaints over my previous video included a moan that witch flying is possible in the astral realm. I didn't say it wasn't possible, and I'm actually not going to say that now either, but I am going to say there seems to be very little hard proof that it is possible. Now, witch flying is a way that witches can separate their spiritual or astral body from their physical one, and they do this through lotions, creams, anaesthetic mixtures of herbs and narcotics to bring about an altered mental state or an altered state of consciousness. Now, I'm sure that the effect on the brain might well be similar to flying in a similar way to taking strong recreational drugs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that anything is actually happening to the astral body, or that it's separated from the physical body. It just means that the witch is high. That's my cynical view. Now, here's an interesting fact for you, however. The image of the witch on a broomstick is actually thought to be derived from the way that witches would apply these lotions to their genitals, because there's more blood vessels in the genitals than in much of the rest of the body, and they would smear the lotion on the handle of the broomstick, because it's quite useful, and then transfer it between their legs rather than using their hands. This was called witch flying because of the changed mental state, and over time it became what it is today, a witch flying on a broomstick. Again, as with the previous video, perception is reality, and arguing with anyone that their reality is not real is almost as pointless as someone telling you that what you perceive isn't real too. Imagine someone walking in right now and telling you that you are not watching this video. Ridiculous, right? Scrying. Scrying is the act of seeing things, like seeing into the future, seeing across distances, seeing the dead, whatever you're seeing while you're scrying. Now, normally, this is something you couldn't normally do. Now, I'm not sure if I believe in this, but I do have a crystal ball myself, and I feel that I have actually seen things in it. Of course, being scientific for a second, it could have just been my paranoia coming true shortly after a trick of the mind in seeing the thing that I was dreading, or wishful thinking confirming the things that I believed anyway. But there is actually a little more to both scrying and witch flying that I haven't actually mentioned yet. The astral body is a thing. It's a real thing, sort of. It's able to be filmed and even photographed. The body emits electromagnetic waves, and these can even interact with others. So more on that next. Altering someone's heartbeat. That's actually possible, it's true. Now, if you're a female, you might just freak out at this. Of course, you can change your own heartbeat. It's difficult and it does require training, but you can do it. I've done it. I've even done it on stage to speed up and slow down my heartbeat. Sometimes you can do that using a trick by pressing on the brachial artery, by squeezing your arm pit into your chest. That can be made easier using a tennis ball or a squash ball or something like that. But you don't necessarily need that. You can just do it just by squeezing hard here, but relaxing the rest of your arm so that it doesn't feel tense. That's one way of doing it. However, this is real world magic, and there's obviously more ways of doing it. If you're a female, as I said, it'll freak you out. But did you know that when a woman is in a relationship with a man and they're in deep rapport, the woman's heart rate will often change to match the heart rate of the man? It's true. You can actually measure it for yourself. You can take the heart rate of a woman at rest while she's on her own and then introduce her partner, and the heart rate will change to match the man. This is known as rapport, and specifically submissive rapport. This kind of change is called pacing, and it's a great way of making people feel much more connected. And interestingly, it is far more likely that the female heart rate will change than the male, and nobody really knows why. But there's one to feminism. Turning one thing into another. This is a huge deal, and something called transmutation, or as in the Harry Potter films, transfiguration. This alchemical change of one material into another is the basis of turning lead into gold, and it's actually possible. Sort of. To turn lead into gold, you need to turn the atomic number of lead, 82, into the atomic number of gold, 79. So only 3 away. Potentially that's not too difficult. The atomic number is the number of protons in the nucleus of an atom. So what we need to do is to remove the protons, right? Well, sort of, but because protons are often bonded to electrons, we also need to make the electrons go away too. Otherwise we'd have a positively charged gold atom, or an isotope. So it would be potentially unstable and would likely turn back into lead eventually once it gets the protons back. This has actually happened in the past. People have made gold in a lab, and we can bombard a lead strip to rip off the protons, but it's prohibitively expensive to do it because the equipment costs so much, and it's not usually stable anyway. Gold has 118 neutrons, and so we also need to remove 8 neutrons too. And that's much harder than the removal of protons. So in all likelihood, it would just lead to an unstable or radioactive element, but certainly very unlikely to be stable, neutral gold. Can lead turn into gold? Yes, absolutely. Is it worth doing? No, not with the current technology, no. Not unless you have a star at your disposal that will easily rip elements apart and put them back together again. But basically, I wouldn't bother. So how can you do it? Because magicians do this kind of thing all the time using sleight of hand. And as I mentioned in the last video, perception is the same as reality. So with that in mind, let me do it for you right now. Here's my spellbound routine, turning one coin into another. The same techniques can be used to turn lead into gold, of course. But what about if the thing that you want to change isn't a solid and can't fit into the hands in the way that these coins can? Turning water into wine, for example. Water is something much more difficult to use with sleight of hand because you can't palm water, you can't do a gambler's cop, retention vanish, bottom steal, French drop, shuttle pass, second deal, or any of the other thousands of other sleights developed for solid objects, and yet we are still able to turn water into wine as magicians. Of course, the most famous person to perform this miracle is Jesus Christ of the Holy Bible, Jesus of Nazareth. But did he exist? Well, that's the subject of another video up here. The difficulty is that many people's accounts of magic and history, dating all the way back to Didi, doing the cups and balls or ripping the head off a bird in the pyramids, to modern magicians like Dynamo or David Blaine doing tricks with cards, the water into wine trick has been done numerous times and in numerous ways, but the perception being reality precept still rings true. Making things disappear, another magician's trick, and I don't want to sound like a stuck record here, but it's another example of perception versus reality, except this time I'm going to give you a more concrete example in your own home. You might have had the experience of getting up and going to get something from another room. What you will likely have noticed is that on occasion you'll go into the next room only to have completely forgotten what you went in there for. The thought has literally vanished from your head. But if you go back into the room that you were in when you had the idea to go and get that thing, you might then instantly remember it. And the reason for this is something I like to call boxing, or as it's called in psychology, compartmentalizing, which is why I call it boxing, because that's easier to pronounce. This literally means that your thinking is controlled by the location that you're in when you have the idea. So when you have the idea to get your car keys, for example, the idea may belong to the living room because that's where you were when you had the idea. Then you go into the kitchen to go and get the keys because that's where they are, and your living room ideas have vanished. If you walk back into the living room, you then remember what you went into the kitchen for in the first place, and now you have the idea that the keys are in the kitchen, but you're going to need those keys when you get to the kitchen. And so you transfer that thought from the living room into the kitchen, so that then when you go to the kitchen, you'll know what you want and you'll pick them up. The second time round, you do it, not a problem. But that's because you put it into a mental buffer that allows you to go from room to room. The threshold or the doorway to a room literally stops you from thinking about another room unless you specifically put it into a buffer that will allow you to transfer from one place to another. And it's a good way of your brain compartmentalizing or limiting the amount of mental power that you need in order to conduct your everyday activities. Now, I know this is a bit of a weird video today, but I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, please do give this video a big thumbs up. If you want to watch more of this channel, please click the subscribe button, which is normally about there, and make sure you press the bell button to be notified of future uploads too. Be sure to share this video with your friends, social medias, comment down below, which is down here, and connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of that stuff that's running along the bottom of the screen right now. And I'll be back next week with another video. But until next time, as always, stay magical.